Now that I've found some copyright-free images to use in my artwork, I'm going to open them up in Photoshop. And for the purposes of our class, I've saved these images in a common folder and a shared folder so that you can access them as well and kind of work along with me. So right now I'm just going to open up the land and the sky images. And I'll let those load. I can select more than one image at a time by holding Control. So it's going to load each one of these images on different tabs, and I can flip back and forth between these tabs. So for the purposes of today, I'm going to select my land and cut it out and then place it over top of my sky or my space scene here. To do that, I'm going to use the quick selection tool. The selection tool is the fourth tool down, and it may be nested underneath your magic wand tool, so you may have to open up this nesting and choose the quick selection tool. It's a paintbrush with little dots around it. So I'm going to go to my land image here, and I'm going to select the land. So I could choose to include the mountains in the selection, or I could just select the grassy land if I wanted to. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to choose to include the mountains. So I'm just selecting it as carefully as I can. And the slower you move, the kind of more careful the selection is. And then I'm just going to drag this, and it kind of clings to the edge of things. And I can make my brush bigger, as always, by going to the brackets and using my right bracket, or I can make it smaller by using my left bracket. And that did a pretty good job of selecting the edge. Remember, if you accidentally over-select an area, like here, you can press Alt and push back that selection like that. So anytime I select something, I always want to make sure that I refine the edge. So if I go up to the top here, I can refine the edge. And then I can also look at the edge on different color backgrounds. So it might just show it on white when you initially do it, but I'm going to go down and switch it to black so I can see what it looks like cut out. And as you can see here, it's not too bad, but it looks a little bit choppy. So up here under view, you can change what color it shows you the edge against. For this, I'm going to choose the radius. And I do this for most of my pictures. I just slowly kind of drag out the radius to see just what happens to my edges, and it will kind of fill in any missing pieces. So that looks pretty simple here. If I were to have had any like grass pieces or anything like kind of wispy at the edge, I might have to bring back a little bit more of the edge, but since this is pretty cut and dry there, it makes it easier. Just gonna press OK. And now it should return to the main screen, but the selection should be a little bit more refined. And now from here, I can just copy and paste this image onto my background of my sky. So from here, I can either press Control C to copy, or I can go up to Edit and just go to Copy. I can click over to my Sky tab, and I can go to Edit and Paste, or Control V would also do the same thing. Now, once you paste over your land over your sky, you can start to see the size difference. So I got these off of two different websites. They're different resolutions. If you were to take in these pictures with your own camera, they would have been the same size and the same resolution, so it would have made it a little bit easier. But for today, we have these two images, one on top of the other, and you can see in my layers panel, I have two different layers. So I can move this around. For the purposes of this demonstration, we are going to add some animals to the land. So I want to make sure that I keep a lot of this land here so I have some space to place my animals. So I might end up having to kind of move this land down below the sky picture. So I'm going to kind of place this where I really like the sky and I really like this part of the background. So I'm kind of moving this around. Now I might have to press Control T, which will place handles around my image, and I'll be able to kind of scroll my image, make it bigger, transform it. Um, so if I press Control T, it puts this box around my image. If I hold Shift and go to the corner, it will keep this in perfect proportion so it doesn't get distorted. But I can purposely distort it if I want by not holding Shift. I could stretch it or something like that. I can also hold Control down and it will skew the image, like change the perspective. Or if I hold Alt, I can kind of tilt it forward or backwards a bit. So for my purposes, I'm just going to kind of leave it as is. But the problem is I'm not getting enough foreground here, and it's getting cropped off because I pasted it onto the original kind of long rectangular background of the sky. So anytime you use Control T, you have to press Enter to get out of the tool, make the little handles disappear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more space below the sky so that you can see the rest of my background. So we're going to have to get into cropping for this. So I'm going to use the crop tool, and I am going to click and drag out my crop. I want to make sure when I'm in the cropping tool that these spaces here don't have any letter or numbers in them. If they do, I need to clear the numbers. So what I'm going to do is just drag out my crop. And after I drag out my crop, I can actually pull down and extend the bottom of this. So I might have to press Control minus to zoom out a little. But I'm going to extend the bottom and just hit Enter. And you can see it added some white there, but it also added more space, so I have room for my foreground. So now I can use my arrow tool, and I can kind of pick a good part of the sky to place this by. And then I'm going to use my crop tool to completely crop out the edges like this. Just double click. I'm going a little bit closer because I have a little white space there. Now I have a nicely layered sky and land with enough foreground that I can place like an animal in the foreground, and it's got a lot of overhead space. Right now, the two different images might have different tones and different colors. We'll eventually add a texture over everything so that it blends nice and evenly. So as you can see, these are on two different layers, and I've extended my background image of the sky. There's some white there, but you can't see it because I have my foreground image of my path and my mountain pass layered over top of it. And I can click these little eye icons too to make it disappear and reappear. So these little eye icons in the layers panel make a layer visible or invisible. Sometimes it's helpful to see through to other layers. We are going to be continually adding different things to this image, but if you kind of get stopped midway and you need to save this file, it's always a good idea to save regularly in case your computer shuts down or something. But we're going to save these as a working file. So I'm going to save this as a Photoshop file, and I'm going to use my first name in my file just because that's a good habit to get into. And I'm going to call this Surreal. And I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file. So make sure that the PSD option is chosen, and it should automatically choose that if if you have multiple layers. It should automatically choose it as that. And I'll press OK. And now when I go to open it the next time, it will preserve my layers, and I'll be able to open this, and it'll open up exactly the way I left it, and I can go in and change the layers if I need to, move things around. If you were to save it as a JPEG, it would compress your layers and everything would be stuck together. So we don't want to do that, especially while we're working.